Before starting, please check the description of this video for any new or updated information. While working with networking, understanding authority is of extreme importance. You may hear the term ownership used with authority. Ultimately, they are the same thing. When a player has authority over a networked object, they are considered the owner of that object. With most networking solutions, including Mirror, servers tend to have authority over all objects, although a player may not have authority on a specific networked object. Authority allows a player to send commands to the server. This is a common way for a player to talk to the server. Commands are often used to request actions by the server. I have another video in my playlist named Remote Calls, which talks about commands in more detail. Generally, authority represents which player has the power to modify an object, such as your character or an item being held by that character. You wouldn't want another player being able to modify your own character. That's where authority comes in. When a player is spawned from the prefab assigned into the network manager, authority is automatically given to that player. Aside from that, there are other ways which you can achieve authority. Commonly, you'll probably want to spawn a prefab for a certain player, which automatically gives that player authority. I have an example of how to do this below. So I have a game object, some prefab. I'm just going to pretend that this is the prefab I want to spawn. When spawning objects, this must be done from the server. So I do a pretend check here. If my player is dead, and if I have authority on this script as the player, then I'm going to request a respawn. This respawn is then called on the server. I probably want to make sure that this is only called from the client as well. So I'm gonna quick check and base.isClient. Going back down, I have my command here, which is run on the server. First thing I'm going to do is instantiate my prefab like you would on an offline game. Next, I'm going to call network server.spawn, passing in the game object, which was just spawned using the normal instantiate. The second part, base.connectionToClient, is who I'm going to assign authority to. If I were not to include this, then only the server would have authority. The client I'm calling this from is the client I want to give authority to on the new object. So I'm going to pass in base.connectionToClient. In result, the player calling this command will have authority, and of course, as always, the server. Now I'm going to show you how to request authority, whether someone already has authority on it or not, using my request ownership on click method. I'm going to go down and I'm just going to uncomment all this real quick. Okay, this is going to actually be demonstrated. What I have here is just a method which runs an update. It checks if I have authority. If I don't have authority, then it's going to exit the method. It's going to check on mouse down. So if I'm not pressing the mouse down button, then it's going to exit the method. And then it's going to raycast wherever I click, check for a network identity component on whatever is hit, as that represents a networked object. And then if that network identity is found, and if I don't already have ownership, it's going to send a request to the server to request authority. And note that I'm passing in the ID of the object that I hit with my raycast. So if I go down where I command request authority, take a quick look at how that works. Then I take that other ID, which is the one I passed in, and I call the assign client authority method on it, passing in the connection to client for the script. And if you're wondering, yes, I could have called base.connectionToClient above when using the spawn method rather than using get component. How commands are called, what object they run on, and what network identity I'm grabbing might be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to demonstrate it inside an actual running project. I'm going to go back to Unity. I have an object in my scene, which is just a sprite render with a box collider so that I can click it. It has a network identity, which indicates that it belongs on a network. I also have this change color on authority script. All that does is whenever something gains authority over this object, it's going to change the sprite render color to blue. Worth noting that on the server, when an object is spawned, onStart authority is not called. I mentioned that the server always has authority on objects, and this is true, but this method will not be called on the server. However, it will be called on clients when an object is spawned and that client has authority. Let's go back to Unity. I also have a prefab which has my authority and ownership script on it. This prefab is set as the player inside the network manager so that it spawns when I start or connect to the server. This prefab is just a sprite which has a network identity, so it exists over the network. It also has to change color on authority because I want to show you that the authority is called as soon as the sprite is spawned. And it has the authority and ownership script, which has the method in it where I can request taking over authority. And just to show you what that looks like, I'm just going to drag it into the scene. You can see it's just a square white sprite. I don't have anything special set up for the spawning of this authority and ownership prefab, so it's just going to spawn at vector 3, 0, which will be roughly in the center. And since this is a scene object, this will be present automatically. So let me go ahead and do a build and show you what happens. I'm going to go ahead and run the build and then run the editor as well. And I'm going to connect this as a LAN server only. As I said, this is a scene object, so you can see that it's present. I'm going to hit LAN client. So you can see that my LAN client player had turned blue because I had authority of it. I see the scene object as white. Now, if I were to click this object, it will turn blue as it's going to call the request authority and then give it to me. If I click it, you can see it turns blue. I'm calling the mouse click checks on my cube because it has the authority and ownership script. It's registering the click on this circle, and it's going to get the network identity component from the circle. And then it's just going to pass that into the method of the authority and ownership script on the cube. So the takeaway point on here is that whatever object and script you run a command on, it's going to run it on the same object and script that's on the server as well. Another thing worth mentioning, if a player leaves a game, anything they have authority over will be destroyed when they leave a game. If I were to hit stop right now, this square and the circle would both disappear. If I'm going to go over to my server, you can see both of them here. And once I hit stop, if I go back to the server, you'll see they're both gone. If your game's going to use perhaps something that can be picked up from the scene and given to players, you'll want to make sure you keep that in mind.